Welcome back to another episode of Let's Renovate a Bathroom, a Build Original series by me, Zack Dettmore, talking about how DIYers can renovate their own bathroom and some things to consider. Last time we talked about MEPs, plumbing, electrical, and mechanical, and today we're talking about closing the walls up. We're going to talk about insulation, installation of drywall, and installation of tile backer. So we've got a lot to do today, and let's get into it.
Let's Renovate a Bathroom, a Build Original series, brought to you by Schluter Systems.
Hey everyone, Zack Dettmore here. In this wonderful bathroom remodel, a little over a decade ago, I switched over to using an all-in-one system for a couple reasons. One, because they offer a warranty with all-in-one systems like the Schluter products, but also because one person, either the tile installer or my crew, is taking full ownership of that shower system and making sure it gets installed correctly. The great thing about Schluter is they have a ton of information online or in person to train installers on how to install these things properly. They've been in the business for about 50 years, coming up with solutions for tile installers, such as their metal edge, which they're known for, but also the uncoupling membrane that we use on the floor and the heat cable that we use. But really what I think is a huge win for us as contractors is the all-in-one shower system, because that's the number one issue I've seen for ripping out a perfectly good bathroom is because the shower pan is leaking. So by using the drain and using the wall board, we're able to sort of tie everything together. It's one monolithic piece. It's very easy to install and it's easy to water test, so the inspectors like it as well. Finally, the other thing I wanted to touch on is the quantity of drains and drain locations. If you're doing a remodel like we are and you have to work around the existing situation, Schluter offers a ton of different drain sizes and offsets, so it's really easy to make sure you get everything lined up exactly and it looks like an intentional design. So that's sort of why I've stuck with these products, and it's definitely limited my liability. Check out their products and go online to see their educational videos. First thing I want to talk about is the insulation we've installed. You'll notice two different types of insulation here. The first one is this rigid foam, and I've done this rigid foam for a couple reasons. One, because we have plumbing in this wall. Now this isn't pressurized plumbing, this is plumbing that is only active when you're using the shower, meaning that if this pipe were to freeze, it wouldn't be a locked system. The water could technically expand within it and it wouldn't burst. But to give us more frost protection, because we do have a plumbing fixture and cold pipe in an exterior wall in a cold climate, we've gone ahead and put 2 inches of this rigid foam insulation behind it. And then what we're hoping is going to happen is we're going to have our tile here, and hopefully that helps warm this cavity so it never becomes freezing in there. And we've done it here too. You can see I've got the insulation behind it. We'll cut and detail this a little bit to make it work better. But what we're trying to do is make sure we have a continuous layer of high performance insulation. This is an R10 behind the pipe to make sure that anything that's in an exterior wall has that frost protection and is technically falling within the envelope. So that's why you see two different types of insulation. This insulation can be hard for DIYers to work with because it takes a little bit more accuracy. So what we've done everywhere else is gone with the most common and easy to install insulation, which is fiberglass insulation. What this paper is on the front is a vapor retarder. So basically it slows the movement of vapor from the house into the wall assembly, and that's on all of this, and it's required by code. The reason it's required is they want to keep condensation from getting into the insulation cavity and getting the wall wet. So the reason I picked this craft face paper is because you can probably buy it at any local lumber yard. They probably have it stocked, and you'll be able to buy one and easily install it yourself with no more tools than a tape measure and a knife. It cuts very easily. You want to make sure you're cutting it accurately and keeping the stud cavity completely full with insulation. You don't really want to pack it in and cut it too large. You want to cut the bat to the correct size so it's filling it up, because the airspace within the fiberglass is going to act as part of the insulation itself. So if you compress all those fibers to try and get it more, you're really not going to get the same performance out of it. So that's how we insulated this space. The next thing we're going to talk about is drywall. Drywall is basically a gypsum product that's sandwiched between two layers of paper, and the paper receives joint compound, which then you sand and blend so it looks like a uniform monolithic wall. So we're going to put drywall on the ceiling and on the walls. You'll notice that we have some cuts in our drywall that seem unnecessary, and those cuts are purely because we are unable to get 4x8 sheets into this bathroom, which is going to be a problem you're probably going to have on a lot of homes built in the early part of the 19th century. You can't have staircases that were made to get 4x8 sheets up, so you're just forced to cut them. So we're going to have some butt joints on the ceiling that we're going to have to tape and blend, but that's the cost of having an old house. Once we get the drywall up on the ceiling, up on the walls, then we're going to transition into tile substrate. We are going to be using Schluter's Curdy board, which is the same thickness as the drywall we're putting up. So they're going to plane out nicely, but it's much lighter than a traditional tile substrate. If you think of a cement board that's difficult to cut, that's difficult to install, the foam board we're going to use is going to be much easier, and it's going to be much easier for us to bring up that curved staircase. So we're going to get that on the wall, and we're going to get this whole place closed up, and that's our goal for today. Let's get into it. All right, so now we're on to drywall. Here's a look at what drywall looks like. There's a couple things you want to know. On the long edge of drywall, that's called a taper joint. So I don't know if you can see this on camera, but basically this tapers away. So what that does is when you butt two boards on a taper joint, there's this cavity which then you can put tape and joint compound inside of. And that basically makes it easier to hide the joint. When you come along to a butt joint where you have two 1/2-inch pieces of board coming into contact, then you have the issue of having to put the tape on top, and you have to do a wider joint. So it takes a little bit more joint compound and definitely a lot more experience to make those joints look good. So wherever possible, you want to try and have taper joints to minimize that extra work, especially if this is your first time doing drywall. The next thing you'll notice is that the sheet is folded behind me, but I wanted to have the paper be continuous if I could. So I scored the back of the board like this. And then I simply folded it over and carried it up the stairs. Our intention would be to put it up, and then we'll just have this joint, which will already have the paper running across it, and we'll put a screw there and a screw there and tape that. So I'm going to measure the distance from here to here to get the length of my board. Ooh, there we go. 94 7/8. So I'm going to cut it 94 1/4 so I have some wiggle room. I have a 1/2-inch board coming up on this side, a 1/2-inch board coming up on this side, and joint compound in the corner and tape. So there's no reason to make it super tight and struggle when I'm going up there. If you struggle too much, you'll end up damaging the board even more than you would have anyway. The next thing we want to do is draw our joist layout onto the board. So we'll come this way, starting with the bottom, mark our layout like that. And then what we can do is trace that layout with a pencil. So the next thing we want to do is cut the board to length. .94 1/4. So I'm just going to use the tape as a guide, cut all the way down. So if you're a DIYer and it's difficult for you to hold the board up and get the screw onto the head of your drill and screw it in, you can actually put a couple screws in before you lift it up to make your life a little easier. This may not make sense in most cases, but a little tip you can try to try and make your life a little easier. So the next thing we want to do is lay out where our light fixtures are going to be and our vent fans are going to be, any penetrations. And just because this is a simple, it's going to be easier for someone who's novice to simply use a plumb bob. So take a chalk line, for example, or a string with a nut on the end. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. and basically just drop down to the floor where the light fixture is, and then I can come down there with my marker and just write an X vent fan. Okay, so now I'm going to put the sheet up. I'm going to get a hand from Justin because it's broken in half and it could be difficult to do alone. If it's not broken in half, you can easily put a 4x8 sheet up alone with the help of a 2x4 that makes a T that you kind of wedge under it. So we'll show both techniques at once, but it's going to be helpful for me to have Justin here because this board's flapping in the breeze. Okay, so you'll see we've got our Curdy board on the wall and we've got our drywall on the top. I'll be honest, this isn't my proudest work, but we are trying to be authentic DIYers here. So we're only really using knives and tape measures to install this. We're not using any of the fancier tools that would be more expensive that wouldn't be open to a DIYer. So it looks a little ragged, but we're gonna fix that with tape and spackle. My old boss used to say there's a reason they make tape 2 inches wide, and it's to fix all those little imperfections. So we're going to clean that up. But what I wanted to talk to you about is the wall board, the tile substrate. In a lot of projects, you'll typically see cement board, for example, and it's a great product. But what we're going with, which is my preference, is Curdy board. This is a product made by Schluter Systems, and what's really great about this in an old house is how easy it cuts and how light it is. I mean, this is a 4x4 foot sheet and I can pick it up with 2 fingers. You know, it's incredibly light and you can carry 3-4 sheets at a time that are 4 foot by 8 foot. So the first thing is the lightness. The next thing is waterproofness. So this is waterproof not only on the front, but on the back. You'll see there's a grid on one side. I went ahead and put the grid backwards just to show that you can do that. Sometimes people like being able to see the grid for their screw layout. It definitely does help for that, but when you're doing your tile layout, sometimes the grid can be a little confusing. So that's why I went ahead and put the grid facing the opposite direction. Another benefit of this system is that you could use it in a steam shower because it's vapor impermeable. So it's a great product and I use it on a lot of my bathrooms, but the reason I think it's great for DIYers is because you're not struggling with cutting it or managing silica dust, which can then need an expensive HEPA filtered vacuum or you need a mask. This is so easy. I'll just show you. It really just cuts with a knife. So you could just follow one of those lines and that's all it is. Super easy to cut. So we're going to install this board on this wall, on the end of this here, and then we're going to actually create a curb down at the floor. So let's install this board and you'll see how easy it is. One thing that's a little bit different because it is a not the densest product, you use a washer, which you can see behind me, to screw this. And you know, usually you get about 1 box of washers and screws to a few panels, but basically you're just going to screw it up and you're just going to screw it in until the washer is just below the surface of the waterproof membrane. Now this is a penetration through your membrane, so in the next episode I'll show you how to detail all these so we're covering up these screw heads. But for now, all we want to focus on is closing up the walls. So we're just going to go ahead and put the the board on the inside and outside of this knee wall. Let's get to it. So if I was doing this install professionally for a client, we may actually have table saws and miter saws already set up. Sometimes we'll run big boards like this through this table saw to get really accurate cuts. I'm going to try and just use a knife for this just to show how easy it is and keep it more user-friendly. So what I'm going to do, this board's been cut in half. They come 4 foot by 8 foot. So I've cut it to 4 foot by 4 and I'm just going to slide it in where I want. And there's a protrusion here from the plumbing fixtures I'm using. And the great thing about that is I can just tap that in, and that's going to be a reference mark for where my thermostatic control valve needs to be cut out. So I can actually just sort of trace around this. Let's see if I can do it here. Trace around where that is. And then I can just gradually cut a hole. It's a little bit larger. And now, for lack of a better word, this is going to be a creep cut. So I'm just going to sort of gradually work in. And I'm actually going to press this into the edge of this. So one trick I can do is I can actually take a indelible marker, and I'm just going to rub a bunch of ink on the corners. If you have lipstick, it would work better, but I don't always have lipstick in my tool bag. And now we're going to push that in, and hopefully the marks will transfer. So we can see a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there, and a little bit there. So now we can sort of creep in on making the correct cut here. Just be careful when you're cutting towards yourself, obviously. Okay, so now we're just going to see how that's fitting. And you can see that's a really tight fit, and that's a lot tighter than you would see with a traditional cement board product, because you just can't cut the tolerances quite as good. Now, I'm just going to puncture in these every stud. See how easy that is? Those washers just stick right in. We're just going to cut this board here, just like that, along the top. Those indentations there. That's where we need to make our cut. So we're going to cut those holes a little big. Another mark there. So here we are, we've got all of the wallboard installed. The Curdy's up there, that means everywhere where you see orange is now 100% waterproof, with the exceptions of the joints and the penetrations. You can see how easy that was. Not all of my cuts are perfect. As you can see, there were some gaps. We freehanded a lot of this. Ideally, you want to get it as good as possible, but we are going to put a wide tape on this, and we're going to push mortar into the joints, so we're going to help make everything one monolithic piece. The next thing we have to think about is a curb. Of course, you can work with the Schluter Systems products and have a barrier-free or curbless shower, but in this case, I'd like to put a curb in. Schluter also sells pre-made curbs that are solid foam. And the beautiful thing about those is you just cut them with a saw, drop them in, and you're done. But for the sake of this DIY-friendly version, I want to show you how you can make your own curb using their board. So all we're going to do is we're going to take some wood material and we're going to wrap it in this waterproof membrane and assemble a curb. and that's going to give us a curb that we can actually customize. So maybe in your house, the curb they sell doesn't work, so I'll show you how you can make your own to the exact specifications of your job. So I've taken two 2x4s, cut them the width of my opening, then I'm just going to slide these inside, and then basically we're just going to wrap them with this membrane, and once that's detailed, it's going to be 100% waterproof. So let's go to it. Just for the sake of showing you how I would do it, if I was doing this professionally for a client, sometimes I'll use a saw to cut the wood. I'll have dust collection, and you get these really clean edges. So just to give you an example, now that doesn't really affect the performance of it because you're going to tape over these rough edges anyway, but it just makes it a little bit cleaner and a little bit more effective when you're going for the install, and you can see how clean that looks if you happen to have those types of saws already on your job. Make a cut there, slide that in right there. Now our final piece, we'll just put that there. Mark our cut right there. In the back. Put that over the top. See how nice that comes together when you use the saw? So that's just another way you can do it. Now, we'll put our plugs in, 12 inches on center. So I've installed the drywall, I've installed the tile substrate. If you want to learn more about installing drywall or finishing drywall, check out Lydia Crowder on buildshow.com. She has every single video you could imagine on how to expertly install drywall and finish it. It'll definitely look way better on her page than what we did up here today. The other thing you want to check out is youtube.com for the Schluter Systems channel. They have a ton of tutorials on exactly how to professionally install this and make it work. So if you're a DIYer and you want to learn a little bit more about the specific system you're using, check out their YouTube channel. Alternatively, they have webinars and events you can attend. You can check those out at schluterevents.com. That's it for this episode. Next time, we're going to be waterproofing this wall, and we're going to be detailing the floor and putting down our uncoupling membrane so we can get ready for tile. That's it. See you next time on Let's Renovate a Bathroom.